If you had to sell 1,000 copies of your book this weekend, what would you do? Hey, my name is Brian Dixon from Hope Writers, and one of the challenges that authors have is trying to figure out how to sell more copies of your book. And one thing that I've found that can really help you as a thought exercise is not to think about selling one copy of your book, but thinking about how to sell 1,000 copies of your book. So I want you to take a second to think about that. Like, how would you actually sell 1,000 copies of your book? Let's say, for example, that your publisher is going out of business and they sent you 1,000 copies of your book. Or if you accidentally ordered 1,000 copies of your book, somehow you had 1,000 copies of your book, what would you do to get those out of your basement, out of your garage, out of your living room, and out into the hands of real readers? So I want to share a couple ideas with you. The first one is, instead of thinking about individual readers, think about who has a relationship with individual readers. The idea here is the hub and the spoke model. So if you think about like a bicycle tire, you have those spokes, right? Those little metal spiky things. And so on an average bicycle tire, there might be, 40 or 50 spokes, but then there's one hub. The hub is what connects all the spokes. So think about your readers as the spokes and leaders as the hub. So who are the leaders that you can connect to who have a relationship with your readers? So that's how you sell 1,000 copies. Let's talk about 5 ways to do that, okay? The first way is bulk sales. So what if that leader were to buy a copy of your book for every one of his or her team members? What kind of organization would want to buy your book for their team? So think really clearly about that. Is there an association? Is there a nonprofit? Is there an agency? Is there a company who needs personal development resources and they could literally buy 1,000 copies of your book? Depending on their fiscal year, depending on their budgetary season, they might have a professional development budget. I know from my former life as a K-12 school teacher and school administrator, we had a line item for professional development. So at the time, our annual budget was $5.5 million. Out of our $5.5 million budget, we probably had about $50,000 reserved for teacher development and teacher training, which meant that I could pay to send teachers to conferences or buy books for my teachers or buy memberships for training or bring somebody in to do training for my teachers. So if there were the perfect book that I could buy for my teachers, I already had a budget. So think, who already has a professional development budget? Wouldn't that be really cool? I mean, think about that. Imagine if there was like a congregation or an association or an organization who could say, I love your book so much. Thank you for sending a sample copy. I think it's great. And I want to buy a copy of your book for every one of our teachers in the state of Wyoming. Like how cool would that be to know that every teacher now has a copy of your book, as an example. So bulk sales would be number one, making one sale, but actually selling all 1,000 plus copies. Number 2 is thinking about sponsorship. So how could you use your book to sponsor something? You can actually get paid if you think about it kind of in an innovative way. So as an example, imagine that there is an organization or an association that has a workshop, a conference, a convention. What if you were to sponsor that conference or convention? Now you might be thinking, wait a second, Brian, this is actually going the opposite way. I'm paying to be a sponsor, but I want to sell my books. Well, here's the little thing. There's a difference between retail and wholesale. I'm assuming that the books that you have, you were able to get at your author discount, which is probably 40, 50% off list price. So just as an example, if your book is a $20 retail book, you could probably get it for like $10, maybe like $8. So if you got your books for $10 each, the value of your books is actually $20 each. There's a gap. There's a $10,000 margin there. So what if you said to an organization that was having a conference and said, hey, listen, I would love to sponsor your conference. What if I offered you a discount on my books as a sponsorship? So essentially, I'm sponsoring by giving you a deal on my books. And I'd be willing to do that. Instead of selling you my books, I'd be willing to donate half of the value of the books. So there could be a conference that's like, that would be amazing, because as everybody comes in for the day, wouldn't it be great if sitting on their seat was a copy of my book? It would be like a little something extra for all the attendees that were at the conference. And you're like, I can make that happen. I can bring 1,000 copies of my book. We can get them on every seat. But the deal is you just pay my cost. And some conferences would be like, that would be amazing. Because for them, the perceived value of your book would be like $20 a book. But for you, the cost of the book might only be $5, $8, $10 per book. So that's the second way to sell 1,000 copies, is partnering with a conference as a sponsor. The third way to sell 1,000 copies of your book is as a donor thank you gift. Donor thank you gifts. So there's a great website called GuideStar, and it's a clearinghouse of all the tax information of nonprofits. So it basically is a nonprofit clearinghouse, has all the information about nonprofits. Did you know that most nonprofits have an annual fundraiser? They have Christmas gifts that they want to send to their donors. They have donor appreciation days. There's all sorts of things that they do to encourage more giving. If you give a gift, you're more likely to receive a larger gift. It's the law of reciprocity. So what if you were to partner with a nonprofit and say, listen, I would love to support you and offer your donor gift? Okay, so subject line to the CEO of the nonprofit or to the person in charge of fundraising, the development officer of the nonprofit. Call it the annual donor gift. Subject line, annual donor gift. Dear name, thank you for the amazing work you're doing. I'm an author who has a book that would be amazing as a donor gift, and I'd be willing to meet you halfway. You pay the actual cost, and we'll be able to send out a copy, 1,000 copies of my book to all your top 1,000 donors. How cool would that be? How cool would it be to know that your book is now in the hands of high-level people, people that are donating, people that are involved, people that care about the mission of that nonprofit? What if you made it your mission to reach out to 100 development officers at nonprofits and offer them the annual donor gift? That would be a third way to sell 1,000 copies of your book. Now, are you making money? Maybe not, but what you're doing is you're building long-term relationships. Those 1,000 copies of your book sent to those high-level donors could lead to speaking engagements, them ordering your book for their own organization, because a lot of times high-level philanthropists also run their own organization. So they might have a for-profit or an association or an agency that they run, and by getting a copy of your book in their hands could open more doors for you. All right, number 4, how do you sell 1,000 copies of your book? Number 4 is curriculum. Curriculum. Could you have your book assigned? Wouldn't that be so cool? What if your book became part of a class, part of a training program, part of a workshop, part of a certification program? Could you get your book assigned? There are a lot of students, right? There are students at universities, students going through master's level programs, students going through certification programs, students going through continuing education unit programs in different associations and different professions. So what if you could get your book to be part of that program? Sometimes it's as easy as building a relationship with a professor, sending a free copy to that professor, and then having that professor assign your book as part of the core curriculum. Could you imagine? Especially with online education these days, right? So imagine you have partnered with a professor at an online university, and your book is one of the core texts that they're going to read as part of a class. And every year, that class is taught to hundreds, maybe even thousands of students. And every single year, they have to buy your book. How cool would that be? Which leads us to the 5th and final way to sell 1,000 copies of your book. And this one might be a little shocking because the customer is you. What if you went ahead and bought those 1,000 copies, and instead of seeing them as a product, you saw them as a business card? Your book as a business card. What if you made it your mission to get the book out of your hands and into the hands of somebody who's highly influential? What if you built a list of 1,000 people, dream 1,000, 1,000 people you would love to have a copy of your book. And instead of waiting for permission from somebody else, you took permission yourself and you said, I am going to send my book out to all of those people. Now, if you really want to take this to the next level, what if you included a nice note of appreciation saying to the person you're sending the book to, thank you for the work that you're doing. As I think about this strategy, I thought about somebody who's currently in Congress. I was like, oh, I love her. I think she's so amazing. I want her to have a copy of my book. I want to say thank you for the work that you're doing. And she doesn't even represent my area of the country. I just love the work that she's doing. So I could grab a copy of my book, Start With Your People, and I could find her address in Washington, D.C., or her local address where she represents, and send a nice note, a book and a nice note inside, maybe even sign the book as well and send it to her. There's a chance that she's going to read it. 100% chance that somebody on her team is going to read that note. But a book has some thump value. It has some weight to it. A book will stand out through the noise. Yes, it will cost you $4, $5, $9 to actually buy the book, ship the book, include the note. But think about the investment. Think about the return on investment of you sending 1,000 of these silent salesmen out into the world, 1,000 copies of your book in the hands of ideal decision makers, people who could open doors for you. So we're talking about podcasters, politicians, pastors, principals, and any other leader out there that could open doors for you because they got a copy of your book. So you could sell 1,000 copies by buying them yourself and sending them to influencers. So there you have it, my friends. Those are 5 ways for you to sell 1,000 copies of your book this weekend. Now, the gap between the idea and the execution is up to you. Are you going to take action, or are you going to wait another 10 years to make it happen? It's up to you. If we can help you at Hope Books, just let me know. Check out hopebooks.com for more information to help you discover, share, and publish your message of hope, because the world needs your hope-filled words more now than ever before.